The Predictive Index surveyed more than 1,000 U.S. employees in 2026 and found that 78% started their current role motivated, but only 16% say their work always feels meaningful. The rest experience meaning intermittently or rarely at all. Clarity of priorities ranked as the number one thing employees say would improve their motivation ahead of recognition, fewer meetings, and more autonomy. Yet only 35% of employees say their priorities are actually clear on a typical workday. Gallup reported the largest decline in clarity expectations of any engagement factor since 2020, which is a 9-point drop. Meanwhile, just 10% of employees say their one-on-ones with their managers are always productive. The most direct channel between leadership intent and employee experience is underperforming, and most organizations appear to be hoping that engagement programs will paper over it. Worth noting that the Predictive Index makes a behavioral assessment tool, and every finding in this report conveniently points to buying one. The insight that generic engagement strategies miss people they're designed for is legitimate, but this prescription from them is pretty self-serving as it gets. We need to make sure we're separating the data from the sales pitch. But Jenni, getting back to the report, it says that 78% of people arrive motivated, and then something in the organization erodes it. If that's true, what do you think that specific moment or mechanism is where it breaks down?
So I really loved the data in the report. I less liked the sales pitch on them, but I think we've all been guilty of probably a bit of that. But there was a line in the report that I really liked, which I think answers this question about kind of where it breaks down. It said, occasional meaning produces occasional motivation. Consistent meaning is what keeps people engaged. And that's the bit for me that I think is where it breaks down. I think there's this sort of, we say it once and then everybody should just carry on and know what they're doing and keep going, which just isn't real life. Organizations change, things happen, change direction, things shift. And we almost get bored of telling that story. And I think that that lack of consistency of message is what's driving this sort of lack of motivation for people. I also think there is a question about how we're identifying motivation. So when we say that, what does that show up like? What does that mean? What does that look like? Is it just that I want to sit on my sofa and watch Netflix all day and I can't be bothered to do any work? Or is it that I don't want to do this particular work because I don't like this? Like, well, I think that's quite broad, and I would love to sort of get more into that data. But there's another line in the report where it says this problem has been building for years, and that for me is the bigger issue here. Like, this isn't a surprise. Like, we've talked about so many things on this podcast over the last year or so that tracks with this. Like, this isn't a surprise. And if it is a surprise, then people have been living under a rock. So I think it breaks down for me because that lack of consistent messaging, that inability to really tell that story through an organization, and the fact that people feel that their managers don't really care about them. I think that's a huge one as well.
I think it's also worth calling out the danger of words like always and never. I mean, for someone to say like, my one-on-one meetings are always the best, like they're not, that's an unrealistic expectation. That's an unrealistic expectation. The fascinating data point to me is one that I called out where it talked about the clarity of priorities. That ranked as the number one thing employees say would improve the motivation ahead of autonomy, less meetings, recognition, those kind of things. That's a relatively easy fix.
Yeah. From
a leadership standpoint. Just give people what they should focus on. The other part of this, which I think says like, what's the ownership that individuals have in this? It shows us that we have such high hope and expectations when we start a new opportunity, like, oh, it's going to be different. Oh, it's going to be better. And we turn out it's just as crappy as everybody else. Like, it's not any better. So the companies out there, just give your employees the focus. Give them the priorities. Let them know what they need to focus on. That sounds like that's where the motivation fits. Now, the interesting part is I would love to know, once that happens, is that the cure-all? Or does then, okay, that's in place, now we need fewer meetings, or now I need more autonomy. Like, where does the need stop? But just focusing on priorities, if organizations can focus and settle on them,
Yeah.
And not say this day, this is our priority, but next week is a different priority and next month is a different priority. That's, I think, the frustration that a lot of employees have.
And just to bring this into kind of the average employee's day to day, because I think there is some agency here people can have over this. I think it's not about waiting for the organization to decide, but actually if you sit down at the beginning of your week and think, right, what are the 3 big things I have to do this week? And if you don't know that, that's a conversation with your manager. But having that time to think about what other things I need to do. And it's easy not to do that, right? I can easily not do that. And I shared on here, a few weeks ago about my 1% diary that I'd bought because I needed some help with what am I doing? And I think it's important to recognize that we can have a bit of control over this in terms of what is it that I actually need to do today, this week, this month. And I think we can all do a bit more of making time for that. If we don't know, then it's talk to the managers. But that clarity, I think, with a bit of pause and stop and this sort of fake urgency going away would probably help a little bit.